So thanks for being here. We are gonna start a panel about curating video games. And so we'll start with a short introduction with every curators we are at this panel. So you will see what everybody does. And then we will switch into a kind of a discussion. And at the end, we will probably take some question if you have some, or some remarks to discuss with you. So Stephan, if you would like to start, please.
So yeah, thank you everybody for being here. I will start the panel with my presentation about the work I'm doing. My name is Stephan Schwingeler. I'm based in Stuttgart, working in Karlsruhe at an institution called ZKM, Center for Art and Media. This is a, well, really world-famous museum specialized in especially media art, digital art, and we have, since I'm there, a big focus on video games. My person, I just want to introduce the bullet points. I have a very strong academic background. I've written extensively on the subject of digital games on the brink, on the edge of fine art. My PhD, that is here, is called Kunstwerk Computerspiel, artwork video game, and it is about digital games as artistic material. It's focusing on modding culture in the context of fine art, about art pieces from Jody, for example, Cory Archangel, and so forth. So if you have 20,000 euros to translate nearly 1 million characters, I'm happy to have this published in English. This is the institution I'm working at. This is the ZKM from outside. We are an ammunitions factory, actually, the largest building in Karlsruhe. And grenades have been produced at ZKM, and now we produce all kinds of cultural events, exhibitions in the field of contemporary art, of course, and with a focus on digitality and media arts. So we are responsible, for example, for these classical media art pieces like Geoffrey Shaw's Legible City that is on the slide here. That, of course, has a lot connection or a strong connection to video games. This is from 1988, by the way. So this is the last thing I was responsible for at ZKM. It's an exhibition in the field of contemporary art curated by Yuko Hasegawa. And as you can see, this is straightforward museum work. But of course, at ZKM, since its opening in 1997, we have been showing video games on display. Since 1997, every day you could play video games in the context of an publicly funded institution in Germany. A lot of people don't know that because they think MoMA maybe is the first institution that is starting a video game collection, but at ZKM, video games have been on display since 1997. I really want to stress this pioneering role. Here, this is the space, the first video game exhibition I curated at ZKM that is called Gameplay. Almost 50 games from the indie sector, art pieces from Jody. You have seen already on the video. There's Mary Flanagan's Giant Joystick, by the way, in the background. You have seen the large projection by Fang Mangbo, who has presented at MoMA as well. And so this is the things I'm working with. So we have this digital art pieces that are video games as well on display, like for example, Bill Viola in the lower left corner, or Feng Mengbo's large projection, Long March, glitch art by Jody, and so on. Here's some impressions. In the meantime, I curated a video game exhibition about political games called Global Games. Video games as political media and video games as socially relevant media. And this is going to be a world tour conceptualized at the moment and organized by Goethe Institute. And we're going to start in fall with the world tour, and this exhibition is going to be traveling around the world starting in Mexico this fall. This is the exhibition space at the moment. You see it's a nice mixture between digital objects and painting as well. For example, all kinds of artistic media are in display at ZKM. And now I have to check my time. I'm 30 seconds over my time, so thank you for listening.
Oh, okay, hold on. See my to-do list. Cool. All right. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction for me as well. I can't present because I'm offline, so that's good. Good start. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll just have to look at them in this mode. Apologies. So I'm Jo. That's my Twitter handle. I don't know if this is going to work, actually. That's really annoying. Never mind. I'm from Brighton in the UK. And that's that little dot there. So I'm near London by the sea, about an hour south. And I curate and produce digital game events that from a very community and grassroots point of view. I first got involved in, the internet tells me, 2006, when I was a student in the city. And I joined the Flash Coders Brighton user group because at the time, Flash coding was the most creative format of programming I could find. And we actually had quite a strong community in the city around that. And so I joined them, and I soon became the co-manager of the group. And I've been involved within the technical community within the city ever since. Probably about 5 years ago, my focus shifted into video games because that's been my lifelong passion and interest. So for the last couple of years, as part of the Brighton Digital Festival, I've been running a event called Pop-Up Arcade. And it's very much inspired by things like Amaze, so it's really amazing to be here to talk to you all. And it's also inspired by things like World Rumpus, so it was very much a kind of club night focused local multiplayer video game party. And we had performances by Chipsel, for example, this year, which was, again, a very proud moment for me, something that I've been trying to organize for a long time. And then we have the party on the Friday, and then through the Saturday and the Sunday, it's an open arcade where different games, not maybe quite as raucous games are shown. It's quite family focused, and then we also have a mini conference as well over the Saturday and the Sunday, and that's free for everybody to attend. I also run an event called Pixels and Prosecco, and so this is part of Women's History Month. We have a festival called Spring Forward in Brighton, and I wanted to bring video games to be part of that as well. So this promotes women's contributions to the gaming industry by bringing professionals and creatives to come and talk about the kind of work that they do. Something, I think you can see that. This really frames really well what I was trying to get across with this event. So this is my friend Kerry. She spoke the first year I ran it, and her talk was entitled Getting into Making Games When You Work in a Call Center and Don't Know Anyone and Have No Relevant Background and You Can't Draw. And I think that was like a really big point for me, because I want to really message that I think video games as an industry and a creative medium should be for everybody, and I want to try and explore how to break down those barriers and think about how to make it a more inviting space. We have cake and Prosecco there, which is my equivalent version of pizza and beer, right? So I think that's like really, really important as well to start framing that in a different way too. And it's also really good. I get loads of free cake at the end. I've also been involved recently with an event called Now Play This, where I was mainly a producer. This is held in London in a cultural institution called Somerset House, which is like super fancy. And they let us do really silly things, like, so we showed this game called Flash Clap, where you clap your hands together and it takes pictures of you and then posts them on the internet. We showed Laura, who's actually going to be speaking soon's game and panoramical, projected into the inside of a tent, and it was all snuggly with cushions. So we basically got to kind of mess around and have like loads of fun in this incredibly formal, important cultural institution, which was very, very exciting for me. So obviously I come from a very grassroots and community background, and that's what hopefully I will bring to this discussion. And my three main motivations within this is to showcase work from creative artists, which maybe people haven't heard of, and try and bring more, them more into the light of kind of people's consciousness. Also to get, or maybe trick, non-gamers to play and realize that games could be for them without them, realizing maybe. And also to support people who have an interest in the industry and the creative practice to get more involved and to try and lower the barrier and increase diversity. Cool.
No. I don't wanna.
Sorry. I thought it was open. It's going to be in the downloads folder. It's going to be a mess, right? Do you know what it's called?
I think it's called Amaze something.
That one? No.
No.
Okay, great.
It's probably in downloads.
Yeah, this is where we are.
And then go down a little bit. Oh, not too far. To Amaze, to the A.
No. Let's do the other one, and I'll try and find it. Sorry. Do you want to do yours first, and then I'll try and find it?
Okay, there's lots of stuff called Amaze on this thing. Thank you. No, it's fine. Here it is. So, hi, here I am. So this is me, I'm Zuraida Buter, or Zoe for short, which is also my Twitter handle. So normally I would Vine a lot on my phone, so you saw me maybe doing stuff there, that was me Vining. Normally I would show a lot of Vines, I don't today, but you can look me up over there with the Vine sign. So yeah, I'm a playful culture curator, as I call myself, and I do a lot of stuff with play and games. And now I'm going to scroll here. And actually, I started quite a long time ago as an internship at the first DIGRA conference, which is a research association for digital games. And the first one was in Utrecht in 2003. And I did an internship, and my task was to create an exhibition which was about gamescapes. And as you can, I couldn't find a picture. I've gone through all of my files and I couldn't find the picture, so I looked it up, and then I saw Tale of Tales, Michael posting this, that they were part of the Gamescape exhibition. And I think they just formed themselves in 2003, so it was quite early on that we exhibited them in the context of a games exhibition. And then I thought, I'm gonna never again gonna curate and exhibit stuff again. So I continued doing stuff in games, but then I didn't really curate anything. I think I wasn't until I started with the Dutch Game Garden, which is in Utrecht, and it's a game. What is it? A game incubation program and a business center for game studios, and we try to help indie developers start up their studios and support them in many ways. And among them was something like I always discovered abroad, like in San Francisco GDC, that there were people from the Netherlands that didn't know each other and didn't know that people were working on games. So I thought maybe we should make something for that. And together with my colleague Sjors at the Dutch Game Garden, we thought of, okay, we're going to make an indie game exhibition, and we called it Indigo. And it turned out to be, in the end, a Dutch indie game exhibition that is taking place annual and is still taking place. And we made these cabinets, especially to, give it a more of a artistic vibe to it, instead of just PCs anywhere and everywhere with cables sticking out. So we tried to make it like a unified whole. And that was in 2010, and here you can see some of we had a lovely building back then where we could showcase this. From there on, I continued bringing people together, actually. It's not on here, but I also ran the Global Game Jam worldwide for a while, and I saw all these people creating amazing games. But I was always interested also in the physical body and in playfulness. So in 2012, I started a Playful Arts Festival. I co-founded Playful Arts Festival with Iris Peters from Wave of Tomorrow. And the first one was about collaborative play. So I wanted people to bring people together through games, and this is an example of it. And we continued on, and it's a biannual festival. And in 2014, we ran this, and it's more about bringing people together surrounding play. So the form doesn't really matter, or the technology doesn't really matter, as long as they bring people together in a playful and social way. And here you can see Click, which is from a dance group, and they try to get some game rules in it. And so Playful Arts Festival has a lot of different things. Like we do an exhibit, and we have a magazine, and we do things surrounding play in the dark and a playful club night, and you see some people maybe that you also find in the audience, and Inspiration Day. So it's actually quite a lot that we do. And we also try to bring students into this and let them do projects that try to engage the public in public spaces, the audience. And this was an example of art students working together in interdisciplinary teams, where they try to bring people's curiosity to the forefront, and you can see some speakers above the doors, and they made a soundscape once you go through it. I can tell you lots of stories about this, but I won't because we have limited time. But so this is one thing that we did in the public, and then we've got I curated Incubate Arcade, which was actually. I'm also interested in game sound and game audio and in music games. So at this Incubate Festival, which is an electronic music festival in the Netherlands, I curated games that did something with audio and sound. So this is a setup that we made in a different kind of setting, actually. And this is another. So we had also panoramical and these performative games. And we also did during that we did a live music session where the composers of the games were present, and then created a live soundtrack during playthrough of their games, which was quite fun. And in 2015, I did an event called New Game Grounds, and that was at a theater, actually. And they invited me to curate something around theater and performance. So we did a jam, and we commissioned someone to make an escape room, but in a more narrative way and in a more playful way that they could also try and create escape room themselves. And this is a performance from a performance artist, so we also try to get different people that are not into games to think of themselves as a playful creator. And this was also during New Game Grounds. And then Shine is a festival in the Netherlands, and we did a Play in the Dark session, so people can also invite us to, you know, create something, curate something that is surrounding play in the dark and with lights and stuff like that. This is also an example from games. So we've got, like, I've got my own festival, but also we will curate at other festivals. So we actually actively reach out to other festivals. Like, this is a theater festival, and here we placed Der Große Gottlieb by a shoebox diorama, and this is a beautiful piece, and it also introduced people to VR and to installation art, actually. And then a couple of weeks ago, we commissioned a maze, and it was something, the commission was create something with weird materials or something that you can use over and over again, and have them be social, engaged with each other. So this was a maze that I won't dive deeper in, but you can see some playful social interaction over here. And this is another dance creation thing. Normally, you can look the vines up in my place. And so I curate lots of events, but I also like to curate stuff online. So I have this Playful Culture Tumblr where I try to collect videos from different playful events and game events around the world. It's called playfulculture.tumblr.com, if you want to look it up. And I also do lots of vines, vine.co.zoe, and I also try to keep up a list of events around the world that are doing stuff with playful and game events. So it's a calendar. So if you have anything that you're organizing, then send me an email. And on 3 June, we will do another playful arts sessions in this case. So that was me.
So I'm going to give a brief introduction of 3 projects I've done in curating video games. Since I moderate the panels, I will be quite quick with this topic, but I first go into this notion of curating games with a collective I was involved to named One Life Remains. And the first project we work on was a very, very small one, very modest one, we called Arcades Didn't Have Keyboards, based on a game made by an indie game developer. And the idea is we had a kind of commission exhibition where a theater wanted to have like 5 arcade cabinets picked from different indie games. And at this time, they had a lot of use of the arcade cabinet in the indie scene community. And we didn't want it to have something like quite regular or standard. So we decided to, let's pick games that will be shown on a kind of a cheap arcade cabinet because we didn't have much money. And that will have a specific use of the keyboards. Keyboard is like the opposite controller you will use for an arcade cabinet. Most of the time it's button and joystick. And so we have picked a selection of 5 games and that have a very specific use of the keyboards. And we had some question about the affordance of the arcade cabinet. And since it used a keyboard, you know, keyboards have a lot of keys. And we start thinking about how can we make it accessible when somebody is in front of the arcade cabinet without having somebody to tell you how to play the game. And we decided to remove all the keys from the keyboard that weren't used, just so it's, you know, like when you arrive and there is only 3 keys left on the keyboard, you know you will only use that. So this was a kind of a first approach of when you bring video games into another context of, I don't know, the living room or, you know, the personal area of the player, you have to provide some elements so that it's more accessible, or at least it's accessible. Another event I've been involved to is the Not Game Fest, organized by the Cologne Game Lab in the person of Katharina Tillmans and Tale of Tales, which is based on the manifesto of the Not Games manifesto, written by Mikhail Samin. It happened every 2 years since 2011. And the notion is to rethink and see how the notion of not games have evolved since the manifesto. And every exhibition was an opportunity to also rethink the context where these games could be really played in a certain way that you get into that concept. And all this gathering of games provide you with a global feeling or a message in some way. That you could understand if you play them in a whole things. So here are some picture of it. This is the last one, which happened at the Cologne Game Lab in 2015. And every time, all the team who work on the exhibition try to reinvent the space and try to have a certain experience of it, which is also a portrait, and I think we'll talk about that lately. And another event I'm involved in is a kind of a small event called Zoo Machine, which is focused on let's try to rethink the way we create or we prototype games by working on the notion of performance, for instance, or the notion of the controllers. Every year is an excuse to an opportunity to rethink as game designer, we could change the relation we have with video games. And every year there is a group of people that gathered, exchange, and create prototype in 3 days. And at the end, we have a kind of impromptu exhibition that happen in the same area where we work on. And the game are then showcased in different locations after the event. So you have at Amaze, you have few examples of that. The one you see on the screen, where the 2 people are throwing themselves against the wall. This is no pain, no gain. You can play it at the Amaze exhibition. And so, yeah, basically, that's it. I think we will start with the discussion. So, thanks. So what's interesting in that panel is that we have different profile of curators here. For instance, Stephan is in an institution, the ZKM, which is like a museum. So the notion of curators are sometimes different from the approach of the indie curator we can have. For instance, Joe has also a background as a producer, Zuraida also, and it's the approach to create an event, an exhibition, might be slightly different, but there is also a notion of preservation that we will probably not dig into during this panel, but which will be also interesting, like the notion of taking care of a work. And I think the thing we've discussed this morning, one of the questions is what the curators can bring to games or digital games or game developers by bringing the games into a different context or giving a context for the game to be played, knowing that you all have a different background and you present things in a different context. What would be your opinion on this, on the things? What could the curators bring?
So the question was exactly how what can the creators of games how can they help us to bring the games into a new context? Or
I think we will go to that after. First, it's more in the other way. Like as curators, what can we, like when we take games, what kind of, context, or what can we create for that? Why do we, for instance, take games and put that into an exhibition context? Or what, like Joe, in your slides, you were mentioning, for instance, the reason why you like to be involved into these actions. And one of them was, for instance, to try to show different way to show games. And would you like to...
Yeah. Okay, so an easy one that I can see for me is the kind of the alternative control aspect. So somebody who's not a gamer comes into an event space or an exhibition, they see a game and then they see an Xbox controller, and they're not going to pick that up. They don't like it. They associate it with Call of Duty. They're just not interested and switch off, and they're not going to experience that game. Something that I really like is, so for example, at the pop-up arcade, I showed a whole bunch of different games, including Line Wobbler. And during the open days on Saturday and Sunday, we had lots of parents, specifically mums, bringing their kids and just letting their kids go and say, oh, it's games for your kids, go, go, go. Not interested at all, really disengaged. And then they'd see Line Wobbler and they'd see the little wobbly stick and they'd go over and they'd give it a prod, and all of a sudden they were playing the game and they're like, this is brilliant, this is great. So you can reframe it in as much as like someone that would never engage with the medium in a traditional way can come experience it in the way that you frame it, I guess.
And if I might add that at ZKM, of course, we have an audience that is diverse very, very much. So we have a lot of young people, of course, but we have also a very traditional art-interested audience. People who have never been in touch with video games at all in their lives. So this is kind of a Trojan horse if you put a video game that is kind of an artistic piece as well inside an art exhibition. Of course, you can get a point across that video games can be an artistic medium and so forth. So this is I think one important aspect of being a so-called video game curator, that you can reach new audiences with your work.
Yeah, I guess in my work I have several audiences. So on one hand, at first I had like the game developers themselves or game researchers, so that's a kind of a different approach to who your audience is. So they know games, so they are easily, they want to play games, and so they start doing it. But with the Play for Arts Festival, we actually try to reach out to new audiences and make them see that games are worthwhile and that they can also play games, and that's interesting, and it's not all Call of Duty or shooters or whatever. So that's often the feel that people get, like if it's games, then it's a certain kind of games, and we try to reach out, which is also why we call the Play for Arts Festival not the game festival or whatever, but like it's the playful arts. And now we slowly create sort of a new way of, or a new medium maybe. So we just pushed forward like playful arts, and now it can be anything. It doesn't have to be games anymore. As you can maybe see at the pictures, it's more about the playfulness, and games can take a part in it, but it doesn't have to be. It's more about the playful approach from the artist or the people. But then again, I also try to get games inside other spaces. So like the Incubate Arcade, that was like, okay, we have music. Well, what kind of games work with that as well? So we're gonna curate that surrounding a theme of video game, audio, music, and we're gonna make a whole program out of that. So it sort of depends on who is the audience, what kind of work I will try to get in there. And people also come up to me and ask me as a curator, so I want to do this, so, and around this theme, can you curate a selection of video games or playful stuff there? And then I will do that, or try to do that.
And this morning, when we had a discussion before, we established already that there's obviously some kind of convergence going on between different fields of for example, media arts and the game communities, stuff like that. And this is something I want to add, because in an institution like ZKM, I showed the slide about with Geoffrey Shaw's Legible City. That is a classic piece of media art, and Geoffrey Shaw in 1988 would have said, "Oh no, that has nothing to do with video games. What I'm doing. This is something completely different. This is some higher." Kind of higher art piece. It's media art, interactive media art. I invented something completely new, nothing to do with video games. And now, of course, when I take pieces like this and put them in the context of a video game exhibition, this is, of course, then we now are at a point that we can see very clearly that there are the same roots a convergence going on, and then that even academics and art historians can see now that interactive media art and video games have a lot in common, and that's something important, I'd say, too.
Yeah, the context provides a lot of meaning. If you oppose digital art from the 80s to something made in video games since the past 10 years, there will be connection made by the audience, definitely. And that's also what curators do, like by providing a certain context, mixing different game or works, the exhibition will say something. And it's important to know that when you do a selection, a curation, it might be totally different if you have like a group of games or works together, and then you maybe pick some of them and put in another context with other games. It will be a totally different message. It's not like innocent to select games, and just also think about how to showcase them or how to display them. It's important.
That's what I experienced a lot with the exhibition Global Games. I thought it was important to present video games as political media, and what I experienced was a huge impact in mainstream media too. A lot of newspapers writing about it, TV stations coming to visit us, because it was for them, it was something new that we put a "fuck the war" claim on the poster, and that video games could be something, a medium with a explicit political message and having socially relevant topics. And this is, of course, is only possible if you curate the games, if you pick the right ones, and if you put them in the right context.
Yeah, I guess as a curator, you see different trends and different things running throughout the world, actually, because, of course, video game is a medium that is going on worldwide, and we, as a curator, we can see some trends, and also if there's
VR.
Yeah, if they're scattered around the world, like if you have Gonzalo Frasca and you have another one coming from the States or Japan or whatever, you can select that and you make a sort of a statement with it, and you can show the world that it's actually worthwhile, or we have to make the statement
that it has a meaning.
That it has meaning, it's meaningful, yeah. Anything to add?
Yeah, and this, for instance, we can provide a meaning with the exhibition, but we can also change the meaning of a game that maybe say something, but will be played differently, because maybe we change the controller because it's more adapted to the exhibition, and sometimes it's also changed the experience. Like if a game is only playable on the keyboard, and we don't want having a keyboard or something like that, we put another controller, or we try to modify the version. It might also change the experience of the game.
But do you do that in conversation with the artist or the designer, or do you that by yourself?
Yeah. I mean, that's also a question, because in the video game scene, the notion of exhibition is sometimes misunderstood. We know the word expo, which is definitely not the same as an exhibition. Like if your game has to be run in a kind of autonomy, like just by itself. It
For a
needs-
year.
For a year, yeah. For instance, at the ZKM, it's different from a temporary exhibition where you have only 3 days of exhibition like here. And you might have volunteer, or you might have small solution. But for longer situation, it requires some modification or work with the game developer. And we also talk about that. We, like 2 years ago, Shalev Mohan, I think he's in the, you are here. You provide some tips for the game developer to what are the things to avoid or to do to help the curators to run the game into an exhibition context. And we had this discussion this morning, and it's really quite different according to the context. What will be your tips in some way, or the thing you always see in an exhibition when you want to showcase the game, and what's the most difference from any media art, for instance? Or
May I start? I don't know.
you look like you.
Yeah, if you want to exhibit your game in an exhibition, it has to work, first of all. And that is a problem. We are dealing constantly with crashing games, crashing software, vandalizing visitors. So they are not innocent. They want to crash the games themselves. If there's something interactive going on in a museum space, they like a switch is or a lever is pulled, and they want to crash that.
If they can change the language to Russian, they will.
They will,
Yeah.
definitely.
They will always find internet as well.
They download torrents in the exhibition space, porn, stuff like that. And this is, of course, interesting because it's a constant race between the visitors and the technical staff. But it's quite exhausting too. So if you are a game developer, please keep that in mind, that people want to crash your game. They don't want to play it, they want to crash it, they want to destroy it. And so you have to make the most stable game without a quit button, that is restarting constantly every, 2 minutes if it's idle, and stuff like that. And it has to be bulletproof.
Like we were saying, having a tracked mode or an arcade mode, that can be, again, not for every context, but certainly for exhibition contexts, having an arcade mode is really good because people will come and interact. Like a tracked mode, like a screen that cycles through. Yeah.
Demo, like a demo going on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, something that shows what the game is about and that it's like, play me, but not too loud.
Oh yeah, like constantly looping soundtracks as well. Like be kind to your volunteers and your gallery assistants. Like don't make it too irritating.
Even like the soundtrack of Hohokam became sort of like annoying after like 12 hours of the same. But yeah.
So it looks like, in some way, arcade games were more suitable to exhibition than both on the hardware part and the software part.
It's an interesting thing because, I mentioned MoMA, of course, before. They picked 40 games, I think. Of course, there are classics like Pac-Man and Tetris and stuff like that, but they chose some more obscure stuff too, like Dwarf Fortress, for example. And Dwarf Fortress is not possible to put it in an exhibition. It's my opinion. It's not possible because this is something you have to play extensively over, months and years. And what they did, or World of Warcraft, for example, they have this too as an exhibit, and they chose to, because it's not possible to have it in an interactive state playable in the exhibition. They produced documentaries about it, where veterans from the games discuss, like historians, and talk about the war, And this is interesting because how do you exhibit something interactive that is not interactive anymore? And I chose for my recent projects to have Let's Play videos included in exhibitions because they have a nice function of well, showing the games to people that are not able to play the games or who do not want to play the games. And I think this could be interesting for an exhibition to have videos in it.
For Dwarf Fortress, we could maybe just print off the 25-page wiki on underground mushroom irrigation farming and display that instead.
Yeah, since the time is short, maybe some of you have a question. Okay, so one question, maybe. This would be the question of the panel.
Make it
the
two best or question three, ever.
Yeah.
So any burning questions?
You heard the rules.
Oh, Shalev.
Shalev.
Do it.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's the best question, but it intrigues me. The word arcade keeps coming back in presentations, in conversation, and you know, arcades are the game exhibitions of Europe, the game public spaces. And I wonder how, and when you build arcade cabinets, but for museums and stuff like that, I wonder how much do you want to come close to referencing old arcades in your new exhibitions, or how much do you want to distance yourself from this historical phenomenon?
Okay, just to repeat the question. So, how far, as curator, would you like to come back to the arcade model in an exhibition, or the other way, to go far away from this model to tackle a new approach? Well, good question.
Yeah, I think arcade is coming back because now we have gathered some experience in the past, and we have seen that something like Dwarf Fortress doesn't work in an exhibition space, or something like very complex doesn't work because people don't understand it at first. They don't, and so they are frustrated and they leave it. Arcade games have, of course, gathered their own experience back in the day, and they just work better for an open space. They are more robust. They are more easy or easier accessible and stuff like that. So I think in my own curatorial work, I now focus too more on local multiplayer and one-button games, easily accessible games, because they just work better, and that could be a cause why arcade is coming back so strongly.
Yeah, I guess it depends a bit on the context in which I show the work. So on one hand, like the Incubate Arcade was not really my choice, but they wanted to refer back to games, and so it was arcade automatically. And then we just made something. We call it an exhibition, and they call it an arcade. So we were like, okay, people will notice that it's games. And then on the other hand, there's also this whole new thing going on with like alternative controllers, and that's very interesting to see. And like Jon and David, they did a workshop with that also, and that's really interesting to see because that makes alternative interfaces for people to engage with the work, and that also makes that it will be a different experience and a different way of setting up an exhibition, for example, and that doesn't have to refer back to the old arcade, I guess. So we try to make new settings for games, actually.
And to add quickly something, I think showcasing game like Dwarf Fortress or game that are complicated in a classic exhibition format is also super interesting because it's a new challenge to maybe an exhibition is not something you go for an hour, but maybe all the day, all the night, or something quite different. So it's also question the border and the rules of the classical exhibition format in some way. So I think it's also new challenges for curators. And yeah. Okay, so we reached the time, so thank you very much. Thanks to you.